Let's now bring in Frank Gaffney. He worked as an Assistant Secretary of Defense in the Reagan administration, and he's now the CEO and founder and president of the Center for Security Policy. Frank, good to have you on the show. Thanks for being with us. And Frank, good to have you with us. Frank, let's get to this UN report. It hasn't been released yet, but it reportedly says that North Korea has been shipping supplies to the Syrian government that could be used in the production of chemical weapons. Not a big surprise, given the long-standing relationship between Pyongyang and Damascus. What do you make of this report?
I think it's important to understand that North Korea's only cash crop, if you will, is weaponry of various kinds, missiles, nuclear technology. The plant, as was mentioned, that it wasn't just a plant that the North Koreans helped the the Syrians with. It was actually an identical carbon copy of a bomb-related plant that the North Koreans have operated for some time, stopped now, started again. This is a very real problem. Unfortunately, it's not confined to Syria, though that's obviously the topic of this report. The North Koreans have been deeply involved, among others, with the Iranians as well. The Iranians, of course, are involved with the Syrians. So you have, to use George W. Bush's expression, an axis of evil that is engaged in, I'm afraid, proliferating some of the most dangerous weaponry in the world. And it's likely that this kind of weaponry will be used, I'm afraid, not simply against the defenseless people of Syria, but against Israel and perhaps others as well.
Well, Frank, you said it exactly right. An axis of evil that goes beyond chemical weapons, also includes nuclear weapons, because we know that there's ballistic missiles as well. We know that there's cooperation on that front. So keeping in mind this dangerous alliance, do you see the U.S. being forced to take some kind of action here?
I think it's likely. Certainly, of course, early on in his presidency, Donald Trump used a considerable amount of firepower to retaliate for an act of the Syrians' use of chemical weapons. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he does that again. The bigger problem, though, is the one we've just been talking about. This is a manifestation of the character and the ambitions of the North Korean regime. They will sell to, I think, anybody with the requisite cash, whatever they've got in their arsenal, and that almost certainly means nuclear weapons as well. It could well be that among the recipients of those nuclear bombs sold by the North Koreans, and I'm speculating here, but I don't think it's out of the question, would be the Iranians. And that would mean that all of the talk that we've been engaged in about how far away are the Iranians and their centrifuges, how many of them they have, and how fast are they spinning, and how much uranium has been processed, and so on, may be mooted if they have in fact simply paid cash, an enormous amount of which, of course, they got from the United States under the Obama administration, and they're in that game now. I don't know that the Syrians are likely to be, but they're allied so closely with the Iranians that, again, my concern is most immediately that other nations in the region, including, unfortunately, our friends in Israel, may well be the receiving end of these kinds of threats from either the Syrians or the Iranians or some combination of the two.
You make several very good points. Let's focus on this Iran and North Korea and potential nuclear cooperation, because one of the issues with this deal of selling chemical weapons supplies to Syria, well, it's problematic on two levels. It supplies Syria with chemical weapons, and of course it supplies North Korea with revenue. So that would undercut Washington's sanctions against the North Korean nuclear program, allowing them to continue to develop the program and potentially cooperate further with Iran. Does this aspect of it, the North Korean aspect of all of this, increase the likelihood of a U.S. military option against North Korea?
I think the president has made it pretty clear that that's being given serious consideration. I don't know that he wants to do that. Needless to say, I don't think anybody who has looked at the possible repercussions of it is keen to see an attack by the United States, perhaps in concert with its allies in the region, against the North Koreans. But I don't think there's any question that time is running out to do something else. And I'm personally hoping that the Chinese can be persuaded, and I mean persuaded in terms of very real costs if they do not take this step, but persuaded to remove Kim Jong-un. I don't see any solution to this problem other than regime change in North Korea.
But Frank, if you keep in mind the Chinese angle here, it seems that a Chinese trading firm working on behalf of Pyongyang was involved in getting those shipments from North Korea to Syria.
Absolutely.
Is that to say that the government in Beijing didn't know that this was going on, or is that to say that the government in Beijing is complicit with helping make chemical weapons that are used against civilians?
Yeah, I think it would be reckless in the extreme to conclude on the basis not only of this evidence but all the rest of it that what's been going on here for decades is the Chinese has been complicit in virtually every bad act that the North Koreans have engaged in. They've either turned a blind eye towards it or in other cases they've enabled it. We know, for example, that the Chinese are providing what are known as transporter erector launchers that the North Koreans are now using to transport and conceal and presumably, and of course, to fire ever longer range ballistic missiles, perhaps against this country and certainly others in the region. That's a proof positive, I'm afraid, of the Chinese game here. And I think that the only way that they're going to cut the North Koreans loose is if, A, they're persuaded that they're becoming a problem for them. For example, these nuclear tests that the North Koreans have conducted have had radioactive material moving into China. But more likely, they're going to have to be persuaded that we will take an action that could be very, very problematic for them as well if the Chinese do not remove Kim Jong-un, the dictator of North Korea. I think that would be in their interest ultimately, even if it's to replace him with somebody else in the military, but at the very least to end this Kim dynasty, which I think has to happen for the various reasons we've been talking about.
Frank, we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Frank Gaffney.
My pleasure. Thank you.